What's up, everybody, and welcome to PPR podcast number 114, the Week 1 review show and Week 2 preview show, brought to you by the San Diego Strike Force. As always, I'm Chase Izidoro. That's Bowe Fertig. Bowe, incredible games in Week 1. Some blowouts, but really some big performers. We'll get onto that in a second. Yeah. The big standout game for me, though, was the one I was witnessing in attendance on Saturday night on KUSI. Granite Hills 27, Mission Hills 17. A phenomenal game to see where these two teams are going to match up against each other, but really where they're going to match up in the Division I race this season. I am blown away by Granite Hills. Obviously, state champions last year, CIF champions for the region as well. But there's something about getting that D1 win when you're finally in the division now. It's kind of like a welcome to the party. Yeah. And I was really blown away. What was your kind of takeaways from Granite Hills?
Well, what we saw, we weren't surprised by, right? Granite Hills ran the ball effectively to start the game. They had a young quarterback who made young early mistakes and what we would expect from a freshman, almost trying to do too much in situations, not necessarily mental errors, but you get young guys in situations where it's live TV Saturday night against a big opponent. And the mistakes he did make was because he was just trying to do too much. So I'm good with that as a head coach. I'm sure Cobbs was okay with that. Obviously came out with the win, but it was a running game of Granite Hills. It was two quarterbacks we saw from Mission Hills, right? We saw Hun and we saw Smith. Both quarterbacks had their ups and they both had their downs as well. So it was a game that met expectations. The result was about what we expected as well. But it was just great to get a Saturday night game under our belts. It turned out really well. You and Bree sounded well on the sidelines.
Thanks.
And the three partners here on the studio. It's never easy to run a booth of three people. I thought Brandon, Burt, and Paul did an exceptional job.
I love the addition to Burt to the group. He just adds that little bit of flair to it.
He played football, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He knows the ins and outs better than anyone.
As far as Granite Hills and their game style, and really how are they going to treat Zach Benitez going for this rest of the year, I think we see a similar situation for the remainder of the season, what we saw in Week 1, which is relying on the run game and then keeping the passes short, maybe once in a while going deep, but really just making it easy on him. And that's so easy to do when you have Maxwell Turner and Pablo Jackson. They're phenomenal. And for guys kind of being almost the same height, they're such different runners. Maxwell Turner is just going to run it right down your throat, where Pablo is going to look for a shifty way to get to the next level. I mean, they're phenomenal. And really, that offensive line is impressive. Across the board, I know they lost their center. I don't know what his update is right now. He was dealing with a knee injury. But they are so good by themselves, but then when they work as a unit, it's incredible the holes they make for Turner and Jackson. That is going to be very tough to stop the rest of the year. We talk about this defense. Obviously the big names, White, Ford didn't play, but I assume he'll be back here pretty soon. We talk about the heat-seeking safeties of Maddox and Glaze, but really the guys who stood out the most to me was the defensive backs, Giselle Ramirez and Eric Grant. You know, we talk about all the big name guys, but for having kind of undersized defensive backs like that, they fly to the ball. And they're going at low where, you see Maddox and Glaze kind of hitting guys right in the chest. These guys are diving at your legs. Yeah. It's going to be a battle anytime you play Granite Hills. Even if you beat them, you're going to come out bruised every single time. I was impressed by them. Grant had a critical interception in the red zone. Giselle Ramirez felt like he was diving in at every single play. That Granite Hills defense has potential to make them an open division team. I really do believe that.
We talk about the secondary of Granite Hills. Nokoy, Maddox, and Glaze really lead that group. But it was those stretch plays like you were talking about, those corners filling those edges. Sometimes you'll get those corners in the back pedal, and then they somehow get caught behind a block. No, these guys are attacking the line of scrimmage. And Granite Hills undoubtedly has the best two-headed backfield in the county.
I absolutely agree. What do you make of Mission Hills going for Hune, the sophomore quarterback, over Keaton Smith? Because I thought Keaton Smith really grew into his own at the back end of last year. But at the same time, when you see Hune stand up there, you can understand.
He has the measurements.
Everything about him. He's got a great arm. Didn't really have that great of a start in that first quarter, but really kind of grew into his own in the second. Obviously, the big interception, honestly, probably put them out of the game because that would have made it a very close game.
At the end of the half.
Yeah, and they went back to Keaton Smith later in the game, so that we at least get to see him, get some run. And he looked okay. Yeah. Adds a different dynamic with his mobility. I don't know how they're going to approach it. I'm guessing they're going to keep with Hune and just kind of grow with him. But it's also a great security blanket to have Keaton Smith. Yeah. What's kind of your take on having that guy who's a senior?
It's early in the season. So any defense like Granite Hills is going to make it tough on any quarterback.
Absolutely.
Hoon, because of his youth, he was good. You know, it's no surprise that he struggled. It's not easy for Hauser to make the decision. I actually thought they would go with Smith because of the experience, because of the run he had at the end of last season. But it's a great problem to have if you're Coach Hauser and Mission Hills. They did lose week 1. Even if they lose next week against a tough opponent, it's 2 losses early in the season against really good opponents. So I think it's great experience for those guys to get it under their belt before league play starts.
I absolutely agree. It's going to be interesting to see just how they approach that quarterback situation. But I do feel confident with whoever they go with. I think they're both going to grow into their own game. Mission Hills is very much going to be there at the end.
Yep.
Maybe D1. I don't know about Open, but
definitely not Open. But Division One.
I think they're going to be in it.
Wouldn't be surprised to see them back again in the D1 championship game.
I have no doubts about that too. We have to talk about some game balls here because it was so shocking to see the stat lines after every single game. Guys were going off in week 1, Bo. Let's start first in the La Jolla 41-19 win over Bishops. Jackson Deal, his legs and his movement and the way they're able to run the read option with him, he is a threat to anybody he's going up against. He was, in the passing side of the game, 12 for 21, 289 yards, 3 touchdown passes. Then he had 11 carries for 174 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. That's 463 total yards and 6 touchdowns. That's an incredible amount of yards. Throwing one to his little brother, Carson. Kai Fukuda had a great game receiving as well. Sebro, we already know, is a great offensive weapon for them. But the read option with Aiden McGill, I think that's going to be really something that's hard to stop. McGill's a nice little running back to have. And then, it's almost like breaking them down little by little. McGill just 3-4 yards at a time, and then boom, Jackson takes it off for like a 50-yard run. I mean, they're going to be a threat, and it's hard to stop with La Jolla.
McGill also had a 38-yard screen pass that he took to the house as well. And you talk about Carson Deal, the brother, 5-yard out, he took it 56 yards to the house. So 51 of those yards was by younger brother making moves, and then McGill took it at the line of scrimmage. So I watched a few highlights. Yes, Deal, Jackson, no doubt the real deal at quarterback. But what I liked from the skill guys was they were taking balls near the line of scrimmage and then doing the rest, right? But it took Jackson Deal to put the ball on their chest to allow those skill players to make those moves upfield and make big plays. So even though Jackson Deal lived up to the early expectations, I thought it was the skill players that took the ball and did majority of the work after making moves downfield. So the skill players, as much as the quarterback Jackson Deal, it's a great culmination.
A lot of big
talent.
A lot of big playability for the Vikings across the board at all positions. I mean, they're going to be tough to stop this year.
And another quarterback that stood out, Jack Stevens, best dual threat quarterback in San Diego. He had a great interview with Paul and Bert in our 1st and 15. So let's go ahead and take a look at that.
You seemed quietly confident when we interviewed you on the pre-PR. What did you know that we did not know?
I knew the work we put in all offseason. I knew how our O-linemen were carrying cinder blocks every single morning up and down our beautiful stadium. I know our O-linemen put in over 100 hours in giant skills. And I know the skills we met every single day, 5 days a week. And we worked from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. During the summer. And during the school year, we worked from 6 a.m. to 7:50 a.m. And we got it done because, everybody let us hear it this offseason. Cathedral went 6-6. And Coach Doyle kind of just kept feeding it, putting a chip on our shoulder. And tonight, starting with the O-line and the dogs up front, I feel like we put the city on notice that Cathedral can be the first name that comes out of your mouth, Mr. Rudy.
Oh, wow. And I think, you know what? I think you put Paul and I on notice because we do talk about a lot of quarterbacks, and we haven't talked about you. And you brought it up earlier. You came 3 weeks before the season last year. A difficult offense, a move, limited practices. I mean, the difference between last year and this game were just off the charts astronomical. I mean, you should have been 15 for 15 for 250, 300 yards, and I don't even know what you rushed for, but what a difference. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I guess I have to thank you guys for, kind of letting me hear everybody else's name and not mine and, put in the work this offseason. So I'm excited to keep making it happen.
I can't even take you serious with that hat on.
You know, they said the player of the game's got to wear this. I guess I got to thank you guys
it's like
for that.
The turkey on Madden. Of course you have to wear it. And
Yeah, I would like to take it off, but you know, I'm kind of looking at myself. It looks good.
it sure does. Young man, if maybe by leaving you out of the conversation, as you mentioned, we provide the fire in the belly to get you in that conversation, and for that you should be mad at us. You should be thankful.
I guess I should say thank you to you guys 100%. Thanks.
We did you a favor.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. We're welcome.
Without a
All
doubt,
right.
you know, hopefully the city learned tonight.
Well, and I just wanted to talk one bit of X's and O's, because you guys were a run-first team. Even last year, you guys, it's a running offense, and now that you've shown the ability to stretch the field vertically, that only makes the running game more effective, doesn't it?
Right, 100%. But you know, Coach Joel always tells us it's not what the defense does; it's what we do. We control our own fate. So if we're going to be able to gash teams running the ball, then I'm going to hand it off and carry out my fake every time. And if we're going to be able to throw the ball, then, you know, I'm going to make my reads like me and Coach Joel talk about, and I'm going to do what we have to win, whether it's running or throwing, because, you know, it's on us always. It's on Cathedral.
I mean, you could have just lined up really and just ran quarterback draw and just sent it down the field. I mean, that's how dangerous it was.
Well, young man, you were right. We were wrong. We will make up for that mistake and for that oversight. And you still are a stand-up kid for joining us, staying late, and for that we're very grateful. Rest assured, you are on the radar now, young man, and we apologize for leaving you out of any conversation. It was our blunder, not yours.
I appreciate that, guys. You know, just got to keep working, keep my head down, trusting my guys up front.
Well, it'll be easy to keep your head down with a hat on.
Yeah.
You know, the new addition to this hat, it's a little funky. I just hope everybody else is wearing this. I'm not the only one.
If you get a depressed vertebrae or something, Doyle
No
will
one's
never
gonna do
forgive
play
us.
the game
All
anymore.
right, get home safely, and I'm sure
Yeah,
this
I don't
is...
know. I'm going to be honest. Doyle's probably going to text me after this one. I don't know how he's going to feel about me wearing this hat.
After this week, I don't think anybody can say he's underrated now. I think he's on everyone's radar, and he has earned that.
Yep.
It's something I noticed in the 7-on-7s in the offseason. He looked better. He looked crisper, but you never know how it's going to play out. I think they shocked Mater Dei with the way they approached this game, just airing it out, and Stevens really showed what he's going to be capable of this year. They have a lot of good weapons, man.
Yes, they do.
Anthony Taylor, Charlie Apps we talked about,
Yep.
but sophomore Hunter Harrington.
Yep.
Big wide
Stood out
receiver
to me, too.
added to the mix.
Yeah.
I love when they could play guys on both sides like Ty Cortez. He got a touchdown
Yep.
in the game.
Yep.
Ethan Ford had a great day running the ball. This Cathedral team, there's something about Cathedral when we know they're going to be great in the wing tee. It's another thing when they add that different dynamic that makes them scary.
This is not the same Cathedral team.
You know, it's when they have those years where they can air it out, like what we saw when they won the state title.
Yeah.
They have high potential for the Dons. I'm excited to see what they can do.
Well, and even when they won the state title, they had Lucky Sutton to rely
exactly.
on. This is a totally different offense from what we see. It's always the run game that propels the Cathedral offense. Now it's the quarterback, Jack Stevens, and his skill guys on the outside. I was watching the PPR Raw, and if you don't watch PPR Raw, take a look, man, because it really gives you play-by-play. It gives you a whole breakdown. If you wanted to watch film, you don't need to watch any film from up top. You got our PPR Raw.
100%.
And I was watching that game, and I was like, wow, Stevens is playing really well right now. And then he busted that 30-yard touchdown run, weaving through the defense. And I was like, wow, I think we were sleeping on this guy. Yeah. Very next possession, 40-yard bomb right on the money. I was like, we were definitely sleeping on this guy. Yeah, best quarterback not named, Julian Sayin from Carlsbad. And he just did everything with his legs, with his arms. This Cathedral team is better than what I thought they'd be on the offensive side. And I have them fourth best in the county right now.
I think that's probably where I'm putting them too. They're definitely within the top 5, and they're starting to make arguments to get up to that Lincoln and Carlsbad sort of area. I think the sky's the limit. If Jack Stevens playing like this, I mean, that might be in his future. I mean, at least on the podium, you know, he has everything in his bag. I cannot wait to see what he does. He will be on tomorrow's podcast with Paul and Bert, so stay tuned for that as well. But let's talk about another player that balled out over the weekend. It was in the Madison 35-14 win over Point Loma. Jaylen Brown, we talk about what he's capable of doing on the defensive side, but then going on the offensive side, getting 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 from pick 6. I mean, he has potential to get himself on the podium as well. If that's how the way he's going to be to this Madison team, I mean, he looked like everything for them.
Well, you asked me last week who I thought other than Julian Sain would be on the podium, and I mentioned Jaylen Brown. Because this Madison defense is going to give that team the lead a lot, they're going to rely on the running game, and he's their starting running back. And then when he adds scores on the defensive side, you think about big offensive guys, big defensive guys, and two-way guys that make the podium, and Jaylen Brown is one of those for Madison.
Absolutely, and we look at these teams. These are all the teams that could be fighting for the Open, really.
Yeah.
You know, aside from probably La Jolla. But when you have a guy like that, the sky's the limit when it comes to when you're running the ball through them, and then what he does on the defensive side. There's so many other big impact guys. Like we've seen T-Val go in there at times at running back. He also plays linebacker.
Yep.
I mean, these teams. There's so many good skill players nowadays. It's really shocking to me. But another guy we have to mention was in the Chula Vista win over La Jolla Country Day, 48-26. Paul Alvarez, 24 carries, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns, and playing with a heavy heart that you reported on.
Yeah, he lost his mother a couple weeks ago, and what a gutsy performance, right? He ran decisive, he was determined, and willed Chula Vista to that win. La Jolla Country Day, we mentioned last week, overcame a 21-point deficit. It looked like they were going to do something similar this season in week 1, and Paul Alvarez took over. They really relied on his legs and played with a heavy heart. You know, I get tingles in my body. I've fortunately have never experienced that, thankfully, and to experience that and then play a game week 1, what a tremendous performance by Paul Alvarez.
Precious moments, honestly, to be able to go out and do that, and for your mom like that.
Yeah.
You know, our hearts go out to him as always. Another player we have to talk about in the Coronado versus Montgomery game, which really was one of the best games of the week, 22-21, coming down to his sneak to get into the end zone. But really, they're running him more at running back now with Graham Bowe. 12 carries, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 2 picks as well.
Big picks.
Graham has been, subtly one of the more underrated guys in this entire county. Maybe it's because he plays for Coronado that it doesn't really shine that much. But, man, he's a baller out there.
Bowe was one of their better players last year, if not their best players, so I'm not surprised that he balled out in week 1. And he, talk about willing a team to a win, you mentioned those stats. Bowe can check mark that W next to his name as well. Absolutely.
That's somebody that they're going to have to lean on all year to get it done for them. And he continues to do it every single week. Another team, and I say team because, I want to give a game ball probably to Sir Autry, but this whole offense really deserves it. They weren't on the show, but Hoover's 52-14 win over Mountain Empire. Sir Autry, 14 carries, 206 yards, 5 touchdowns. Christian Noriega, 8 for 10, 256 yards, 2 touchdowns, and basically all those yards and touchdowns going to Xavier Williams, 6 receptions, 231 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What is this Hoover team capable of? Because they're looking like front runners in D5.
I was just going to say the same thing. They're my favorite right now in Division 5. And what I like most about those stats, 200 yards rushings on 14 carries.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Normally, you have 20-plus carries to get to that mark. 231 receiving yards on 6 receptions, averaging nearly 40 yards receiving a catch. That clip is probably going to fall. Those are lofty expectations. But to start the season like that, and Christian Noriega, 250-plus passing yards on 8 completions. Efficiency, right? They didn't need a lot of plays to get those, and that was most impressive to me.
Autry is really one of the more underrated guys, I guess, because he's at Hoover. I mean, probably not the yards per carry, but the workload, I think, stays the same. He could be pushing up to 200 yards every game. I fully believe it. He's an incredible running back for Hoover. Really, I want to see what they grow into because they've had some off years, and I think this year could be one of those teams where, like sort of what we saw from like UC last year, where like they just put
Crawford last year.
Exactly, where they just put up massive scoring points.
Yeah.
I could see that from Hoover.
A city team that was overlooked for a long time. Matt Marquez really has developed that program, and now Will Gray at Hoover has been there for a few years now and is doing an exceptional job with that program, leading the way.
Another sort of team shout out here is Westview with Mason Walsh, 14 of 21, 203 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Brian Lloyd, 7 receptions for 144 yards, 3 touchdowns, and got himself a pick.
Right.
I saw them play, I believe, against LCC in 7-on-7. They looked pretty good. I want to see what Westview can get back to, obviously, the Westview old. It's going to take a while, but they have some nice players on that team.
I love that we're talking about these smaller division teams because those teams are often overlooked, and when you put up numbers like that, you're going to get some love from us.
And also, LCAP, as always. Brant Barker, 22 of 30, 317 yards, 7 touchdowns. 7, and 4 of them going to Chance LaChapa, who had 161 yards and 7 receptions. I mean, just big playability. I loved watching them. I want to see what they grow into because it's always kind of hard to tell with LCAP. Sometimes they look great. Sometimes it's like, okay, it's more of a defensive side of team. That offense, if they're running it like that, they look phenomenal.
I forgot the brothers' names. There was 2 brothers. One was a really good athlete.
Yoakley's.
He played Thank you very much. Yoakley was on our Silver Pigskin podium. Those are the type of numbers those guys put up, right? And that's what made the LCAP program run. So if they got guys doing those type of things in week 1, that's going to definitely be a team to look out for.
So game balls out to all of you. We have no game balls to give you, so theoretical game balls. But as of now, that will do it for week 1. We will go now into the preview for week 2, and we start with the game of the week. 1-0 San Marcos at 0-1 Mira Mesa. I got to watch San Marcos. I was doing the dine and dash with them as well. Creep Machielli looks really good, but he's not afraid to throw caution into the wind. He tests coverages a lot. He throws it into tight windows. Most of the time, he makes it look great. The player that stood out to me the most was Jace Nix. I think
he's explosive on film.
And once he gets the ball in his hands, he just goes. Love what I saw from him. He balled out with 2 touchdowns. Also, Justice Woods, I thought it looked great on playing on both sides of the ball. Not too high of an impact in week 1, but just a player that's going to have a high impact for San Marcos. But going up against this Mira Mesa team, they're 0-1, but Tyson Lyons still threw for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns. Chris Brown had a great game. So did Amari Sanders. Big show here. A lot of points. I understand why this is game of the week. This can be a high-scoring affair. Not bad defensively from what I saw San Marcos, but I think what Mira Mesa brings to the table, I mean, we could be looking at a 30s to 30 type of ball game here.
This is going to be a quarterback game in our game of the week. We talked about Machielli before, but it's Tyson Lyon, 326 passing yards on only 15 completions. So you talk about big plays, Amari Sanders and Chris Brown on the outside. They're going to have big seasons. We know San Marcos can put up points. Last year, they gave up a lot of points. They only allowed 14. So in week 1, now they go up against Mira Mesa, who scored 21 against Edawanda, who's a really good program out in the Riverside area. I see 30 points winning this game in the low 30s, but it's going to be a quarterback matchup. Which quarterback is going to play best is going to be the decisive winner.
Absolutely, I agree. I cannot wait for that one. Now we go to the National City Mile Cars South Bay game of the week, the game you'll be covering. 0-1 Point Loma at 0-1 Otay Ranch. Obviously, it's a big matchup whenever 2 teams lose their first game of the season. Both teams look good, though. I know Otay Ranch fell to Mount Carmel 28-27. I really like Sean Pomato, their quarterback. I think he has a lot of potential. Kind of bounced around a little bit. It's good to see him now in Otay. But Brady Allen had a great game against Madison. We talked about New Begin as well. He looked not too bad against that Madison defense. I want to see what Otay Ranch can do to stop this Point Loma team, because I think this Point Loma team could go out there and put up some big numbers.
They're the D3 runners-up.
Yeah.
So they definitely, not only do they have their chip on their shoulder to come back and try to repeat another championship appearance, but they played against a really tough Madison team in week 1 and competed for most of the game against a really good defense. So with that being said, starting 0-2 isn't the worst thing because it's really gearing yourself towards league play. But you never want to start the season winless after 2 games, and it's always good to get back on the train after a big win. So Otay Ranch second-year head coach Brad Burton has his brother as OC now. They played a really competitive game against a well-coached Mount Carmel team. And then we talked about on the other side against Madison, Point Loma is definitely the favorite in this one, but Otay Ranch, for whatever reason, is always competitive. They never have the big names, so they lost 28-27 in week 1. I expect a 1-possession game in this one in our South Bay game of the week.
I could see that as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Point Loma could be a mismatch for them.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised as well if Otay at their home field puts up a much better performance.
Right.
Now we get on to the North County game of the week, and really the game I'm looking forward to the most. The Tafuna Warriors from American Samoa coming to 0-1 El Camino. I just have to say this. Growing up playing football in this county, playing football at Cathedral, I've had so many Samoan players that I've played with that have been my teammates. And, I love the culture that they have built in San Diego when it comes to San Diego high school football. So to have a team come from American Samoa and play a team that has so many Pacific Islanders with El Camino, that makes me so happy. I don't know if we're going to be seeing, a luau like we saw with Coach Dunn.
Right.
I don't know if we're going to be hosting them like that. Hopefully El Camino does something cool in the lead up to the game. I want to see a haka. That's whoever's shooting that game, I need to see a haka from the sideline.
Definitely.
But it's just going to be such an incredible moment and so cool that we get to host them.
El Camino always has a great environment at home in Wildcat territory. This is going to be a great experience for both programs.
Absolutely. And, one thing I want to look at for El Camino's side is Carson Howard and Devin Serta. We didn't get to see them because they were playing in Mission Viejo in the game they lost. But I really do think that they have potential to lead this team to new heights. They came up short in the D1 playoffs after making a very good run. I think they have really high potential, and that's something I cannot wait to see them play. I don't know much about Tafuna Warriors. I'll probably have to do a little bit more research as to how they look, but I have confidence that El Camino can get this job done.
They played against a really good Mission Viejo team. The Diablos are one of the better teams in the southern section. They have been for the past 2 decades. So that loss isn't surprising, but what great balance the Wildcats have on offense with their quarterback and running back.
Absolutely. Now we go to the Jersey Mike City game of the week. 0-1 University City at 1-0 Mission Bay. This is really cool to see this Mission Bay team because they have so many nice little basketball players that are now on the team becoming 2 sports stars. I like what I've seen from Charlie Hutchison and Isaiah Whitehurst. How does that play up, though, against a University City team where we know they lost so many good players, but now the players that are there are still balling out? We didn't really give them a game ball because we waited for this moment to talk about them. But Quentin DeMar had an incredible game.
Yes, he did.
14-29, 324 yards, 3 touchdowns. 2 of those touchdowns going to Joshua Dixon, who had 213 yards. Roman Rodriguez, a great time running the ball as well, something we didn't know what we were going to get with Sam Harris leaving. 9 for 93 with a touchdown. UC is very much still a great football program, put up against a very good La Costa Canyon team. It's a close game. I probably am favoriting University City here, but there is that different dynamic from the athletes that Mission Bay has, and they looked electric in week 1.
I like Roman Rodriguez. He's a 3-year starter. He's been with that program throughout his career, which is nice. He was always a part of a running back committee, and now he's their guy. 9 carries, 93 yards, and a tub. 10 yards on the ground. That's not too shabby. And he's a good receiver out of the backfield. You talked about Dixon. Damara was his first real start. What's this kid made of? He's only a sophomore, 324 passing yards. We saw that one where the pocket broke down and he broke outside, found Dixon, who did the rest. I have UC favored in this one as well, but Mission Bay, not so little. Charlie Hutchinson, 6'6" quarterback. I caught the state championship game. I was doing play-by-play. Hutchinson dropped 30 that game from inside and outside. He has the range as well. Not the greatest completion percentage, but it was his skill guys doing a lot of the work, catching balls over the middle of the field, 5-10 yards downfield, and doing the rest. So I love to see this Mission Bay team start off the season well. But just for whatever reason, this UC team, and this is last year's city rematch, right? UC had been in the city league for a long time now, and now Mission Bay is there. This city league is now down to 3 teams. It's Mission Bay, Coronado, and Crawford. I still think Mission Bay is the front runner in the city league, and I still think it's early for those basketball guys to go up against a program like University City.
I agree.
Who is just, as far as experience playing football, they're more experienced, and because of that, this early in the season, maybe down the road, we were talking Cathedral Mater Dei last week, very similar situation. They just have more experience on this side, and I see UC putting work on them.
I agree. I think there's that little bit of a wild card of could these Mission Bay guys go out there and prove to play on that level because they're so athletic.
And this is the test.
It's a great test for them. We're going to see exactly who they are and what they can build upon after this game. So great game for them. We go to the El Cajon Ford East County game of the week. 1-0 Mar Vista at 0-1 Valhalla. The one guy that's standing out really big for me is Valhalla's running back, Dominic Silva. 25 carries, 173 yards and a touchdown. When it comes to Valhalla, I think running the ball is going to get the job best done for them. Also, I love the fact that they had that prep rally. They look phenomenal.
Yeah.
I have to shout them out. But I think Valhalla, it's a good time for them to bounce back after a bad week 1 loss. And now playing at home, Allison Edmonds will be going out there as well.
She gets to go back to her alum. That's
Yes.
always fun.
I feel like we always send her out there week 2, so it's good good to have a little reunion there. But I think I might be favoriting Valhalla in this one. I think they have that edge to get back on the board. Running the clock down with Silva, I think helps them a lot.
Mar Vista coming off a big win against O'Farrell. Elijah Clark is their guy. That offense and that team runs through Elijah Clark. We saw big plays from Hilltop, big chunk plays from their quarterback. And I see Elijah Clark doing similar things against Valhalla. That was a 27-21 loss to Hilltop. I see that score being around that mark as well.
Okay. And then we go dine and dash now. For me, I will be going to the Chula Vista versus Mount Miguel game. Mount Miguel's opener at home with Verlaine getting his first game at home. Both these teams 1-0. I'm really going to refer to you on this because you just watched Mount Miguel. You've been able to cover this Chula Vista team a lot. What is it that I should be expecting? Because when I look at this, it's very hard to split between these two teams because I know how hard-nosed Chula Vista can be.
Right.
But at the same time, I know the big playability that Mount Miguel has.
Two totally different offenses, right? And one way to slow down that Mount Miguel offense is keep them off the field. That's what Paul Alvarez does. He touched the ball 24 times in week 1. I don't know how many weeks he can keep that up. Elijah Gillespie had a really good game as well. He's 6 receptions, 160 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I love this matchup for Gillespie against a really athletic Mount Miguel secondary. Delonte Williams, we talked about him in some of the preseason stuff. The best freshman performance I have seen live in person in week 1, he made every tackle on special teams, it seemed like. He never came off the field, had 6 tackles on defense, had over 100 receiving yards in the first half alone with a pair of touchdowns. Matthew Barton played well. It was what we expected from this offense, chucking the ball around like they're playing in the backyard. So not only keeping this offense off the field, but it was Ladarian Perkins of Chula Vista that had 2 interceptions, slowed down the offense that they played against in week 1. And the 2022 Defensive Player of the Year for the Pacific League, and that is Almeida. He had 7 tackles, 3 sacks. So defensive ends slowing down, getting pressure on Barton to slow him down, and guys like the Darian Perkins in the secondary. They're going to need a few turnovers, Chula Vista is, against Mount Miguel. Mount Miguel has, as athletic as they are on the offensive side, they're just as athletic on the defensive side. White was flying around their outside linebacker. He had a touchdown to start the game. He was laying the lumber on the offense of Sweetwater. And Mount Miguel on the defensive side is going to need to stop the run, right? And they have 3 hogs up front, 275 pounds plus. When you talk about Barajas, Sarmiento, and Urbina, 72, 77, and 78, they plugged those holes up front. Sweetwater didn't have much room to run in week 1.
It's going to be an interesting battle for both sides of the ball. Obviously, when I'm looking at it, I'm looking at Mount Miguel's offense against Chula Vista's defense. I think that might be leaning more on where this game will be decided. But if Mount Miguel cannot stop that run against Chula Vista, it's going to keep this game very, very close.
Chula Vista is going to need to win the time of possession to keep this game close.
Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting one. I cannot wait
to go.
I cannot wait to go out there and cover that one. But now for some other games that are not our premier games, we have 1-0 Del Norte at 1-0 La Costa Canyon. Huge win for both teams. It's starting off week 1. I think Jack Schneider is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in this county. He's, especially when we talk about guys like Deal and Stevens, guys who are great at throwing the ball, great at keeping the possession for their team, and then can extend the play with the run game. I think with Jack Schneider, 21 of 25.
Yeah, that's a great stat line.
215 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 carries for 53 yards.
Yeah.
Ty Olson, 4 catches for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's still doing the same.
Just another day for him.
Yeah, exactly. So I think Jack Schneider, he's so efficient at just moving the ball downfield. This Del Norte team could be somebody that surprises people this year because of just how efficient they are on the offensive side of the ball.
And we get to see if they're the real deal in week 2 because they go up against a really good LCC team who beat UC, I thought pretty convincingly, 41-25, put up 41 points. And it was the balance on offense for me from LCC. Coach Sovacool's been there for over a decade. He knows what he's doing with this program. They're always competitive out of the Avocado League. So against a Del Norte team that we really get to see what they're made of in this week, and I think it's a great test for both programs.
Absolutely. I was kind of blown away by La Costa Canyon, this year, just how many weapons they have
Yeah.
now on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to be very tough to stop, especially for Del Norte. We know they need the defensive side of the ball to step up compared to last year. I probably go into this one with La Costa Canyon as favorite,
Yeah.
but Del Norte's offense can keep them in this
We're
game.
going to have a combined 60 points, no
Yeah,
matter how
probably.
you slice or dice it. So it's going to be a good one to keep an eye on.
Another big one as well is 1-0 Poway at 1-0 St. Augustine. Litmus test for both teams.
Yes.
I know we said that last week about Poway going against RB, but it was kind of a game we expected, low-scoring battle.
Yep.
This one now, how does Poway match up against a St. Augustine team that has a bunch of weapons that are growing now in their second year, but also how does St. Augustine go up against a defense that is as good as Poway's can be?
This is going to be a running game, believe it or not. We know Poway, what was it last year, the saying, take them to the woodshed?
Yeah, exactly.
And they did it on the ground, 23 carries and 13 pass attempts. Not a lot of plays on offense for Poway, but then for the Saints, 34 carries to only 9 pass attempts.
Yeah.
It helped that they were up 50-7 over Patrick Henry, but they averaged 8.5 yards on the ground. Patrick Patterson is the guy that is leading the way for them. And Will Flores, a freshman, he had 8 yards per carry and a pair of touchdowns. So this is going to be on the defensive side, which front seven plays better, and on the offensive side, which team can run the ball better. It's going to be an exciting one. And Fa'alave Johnson also looked explosive for St. Augustine.
The freshman honor Fa'alave Johnson, 2 touchdowns in his own right.
Yeah.
When we talk about that, it's going to be a running game and it come down to the defense. That seems to favor Poway. I do think that those numbers for Saints might be a little misdirection just because of how high they were already up on the scoreboard. I do expect Brady Palmer to throw it a lot more in this one, but Poway's secondary is pretty good. So I don't know how this one's going to play out. It's really going to be a breaking point for where Saints is wanting to go this year. Can they take down a defense like Poway? Can they stop a rushing game like Poway? This is a great test for them.
Well, and they're going to need to play physical ball throughout the year because the Saints play, for me, the best league right now in the Western League.
Absolutely.
And when you play against teams like Lincoln, Cathedral, and Madison, you need to be physical up front. And we know Poway to be that team. So it's going to be a great test for them. But let's talk about the Clifford brothers real quick, right? We know David, we know David Clifford, the offensive tackle who has multiple Division I offers, but it's actually James Clifford, the tight end. He's a sophomore, stands 6'6", big target for Hurst, and he had some impact plays in week 1.
Absolutely. And those games look like so good on the schedule.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to get out there. But that'll do it for now, our preview for week 2. But one more thing before we go. Let's talk about Lincoln going to Hawaii and putting on a show against Hawaii. And just the experience alone, I was following along with them. They look like they had the time of their lives.
Man.
So happy for them. I want to be a part of that.
When you
luau.
could see Dunn and Carter doing a luau and shaking their bottoms like that,
I was cracking
I mean,
up
how
the
do
whole
you
time.
how do you not love that?
But also on the field, the performance they put against the team. I don't know too much about Waianae to make the judgment on them, but they allowed only 50 yards of total offense. And this is something Lincoln.
Right.
So this is something I talked about with them in Madison, when we were talking about the Western League and defense. That is a huge performance for Lincoln's defense and could propel them going further down the line.
Yeah, and they go on the road or they play at home against an out-of-town team. So another great test against out-of-town teams. We actually have a lot of some of our better programs in San Diego going and playing against out-of-town teams this week. So it's nice to see because it really does give us a good indication of how good our programs are this year. So I love to see it. One of the games that stood out to me last week against an out-of-town team was Helix, down 24-7. Then Kevin Allen returns a kickoff to the house and just rejuvenates that offense. Kevin Allen is going to be that guy for them. And then you have a quarterback, Rylan Jesse, who is going to keep any game close, and Jackson Daniels also had a good game. So that Helix team to come down from 17 and come roaring back and win 38-34 was a game that stood out to me last week as well.
And especially a game that they scheduled literally that week.
Yeah.
They had to put it together late, probably get the film all late and everything. To go out there, be down like that, and come back, I think that's a Kickstarter for what we can expect from Helix this season.
Yeah.
But now that'll do it for us for this Week 2 preview show and Week 1 recap. You guys can stay tuned tomorrow where Paul and Bert will sit down with Cathedral Catholic quarterback Jack Stevens. But for now, we'll send it away.